NASA employees tend to be some of the most credible witnesses out there when it comes to all sorts of weird things, and when one claims to have been attacked by a demon, it's time to listen. Today we're diving into the case of Bill Vail, former NASA engineer, and it's worth listening to. So Bill has always been incredibly scientifically minded. He's always had technical jobs. He was with NASA for 15 years as a robotics engineer. He also spent a little bit of time as a pilot apparently. He's somebody that's very process oriented, and his friends and family say he's not really imaginative. He's very much to the point. He's here for the facts. So, a credible witness. So, many years back, Bill and his wife got a divorce and it caught him off guard. He has a bit of a midlife crisis. He decides to move back home to Arlington, Texas, where his brother lives to have a fresh start. He even takes up a job at his brother's water purification company. Super simple, right? So Bill had only been living in Arlington for a couple of months when the incident happened, and he'd been with the company for maybe a couple of weeks. It was a weekend. It was a Saturday. House call comes in and nobody wants to do it. It's the weekend. Bill's like, okay, I'll take initiative. What was his task? He was supposed to demonstrate how to install and use the water purification system in somebody's home. The dispatcher for the company was like, hey, it's a little bit weird, but the person who wants this is adamant that you gotta be there at 5 o'clock. Not a minute earlier, not a minute later. It might sound really weird, but some people are just like this. So he gets there for that time. He starts walking up the path to this big brick house at 4:59 on the dot, and as he's getting closer to the front door, he can hear a noise through it because the door is slightly ajar, and this noise is screaming. It sounds like a woman screaming, "Get out of here!" He doesn't know what to make of it, and he decides to go inside and investigate because curiosity got the better of him. So he peeks around and he finds a room where there are 3 men on their knees in a little circle, and there's this woman walking around holding a book in her hand, and she's speaking in tongues. As she's circling them, touching each of them on their heads and screaming, he's like, okay. Bill's starting to tiptoe out of there. He's having some second thoughts, but right before he makes it out, the woman looks up at him, points directly at him, doesn't break eye contact, and he gets this very strange sense that she doesn't want to do good things to him. So he bolts. He gets out of there, gets back to his car, calls back the dispatcher, says absolutely not, do not send me back there, this is weird. He goes home, turns on the TV, makes some food, wants to relax. But as he's watching the TV, out of the corner of his eye, he sees something small dart across the ground, which frustrates him. He's like, okay, it's a rodent. So he gets up, turns on the lights, looks around, but after an hour and he finds nothing, he goes to bed. Later that night, he's woken up by the feeling of a small creature running over his feet. Bill's ticked, once again, gets up, turns on the lights, determined to catch whatever this little creature is. Well, he can't find it. He's looking everywhere. He's listening, creeping around, nothing. After searching for a while, he's like, look, I need my sleep. We're going to bed. Forget about it. So he does get back to sleep. But then he's quickly woken up by his bed violently shaking. But then it stops almost as quickly as it started. So he goes online. He's like, okay, anybody else talking about maybe an earthquake? Nada. Apparently there's a military base kind of near his place, so he's like, okay, probably that. Or maybe it's the oil rig on the other end of town. Logical answers. But the other incidents from earlier in the day are also weighing on him. And then the internet goes out. So he calls one of those 24-hour help hotlines, and they put him on hold while they figure out solutions. So he's just sitting there, listening to this elevator music nonsense. But then staticky sounds start to come through the receiver. There's a voice speaking nonsensical language, and it sounds almost threatening, which Bill's freaked out by, so he hangs up. Then a couple minutes later, he gets a call back from the original rep. He's like, hey, what was with the weird noise? And the rep's like, yeah, no, I heard it too. I got nothing. But hey, your internet's working now, so we're done. Bill's still on edge, but he's determined to try and get some form of sleep, so he tries again. Goes to bed, closes his eyes, and then he hears a noise just under his bed. And he's like, okay, look, my brain's overactive, we're just going crazy. So he looks down, looks over the bed, and he sees a hand slowly reaching up, reaching for his foot. He leaps out of bed, flips on every light, checks under the bed, nothing. He's like, okay, sleep is not happening. He goes to the kitchen and pounds some coffee. So, it's the next day. Bill goes to work as usual, tries to act normal, but as the end of the day and going home time approaches, he's a little anxious about what he's gonna find at home. So he gets home, flips on all the lights, and he's sitting in the same chair he always sits in, watching TV, eating supper. He looks down for a minute to get another bite of food, and when he looks up, a glass bottle flies and hits the wall beside him, shattering before hitting the ground. Then all the lights in the house go out, so Bill finds a flashlight, and then he hears a slamming noise that doesn't make sense. The lights come back on, and Bill's like, look, I need help. So he calls his brother. He's like, please just come over here. I need a sanity check. The brother comes over, Bill explains everything, and he's trying not to sound crazy, but he's like, please validate or discredit me. So Bob goes into a closet. That's the brother's name, by the way. Turns out the light and experiences the feelings, like something runs against his leg, something's crashing. but he doesn't tell Bill. He's like, no, everything's fine. It's just rational stuff. So Bill then calls his buddy Michael, who lives far away. They chat about it for a bit, and then the weird voice from the night before interrupts the phone call. Michael starts recording it for evidence, and when it eventually ends, he tries playing it back, but it's silence. Bill's freaked out. He doesn't want to be home alone anymore, so he invites Bob and the wife over for dinner. Just like, hey, come over, hang out. After supper, the trio is watching TV, and Bill sees the thing out of the corner of his eye again. So he's like, hey Bob, why don't we swap seats? Just for an experiment. Well, after a couple of minutes, Bob leaps out of the chair. He's like, okay, there's something, there's a critter, there's a rodent. Well, what do you got now? Apparently he was running on 2 feet. Didn't look like a regular animal. Bob finally fesses up about what he experienced earlier, and now the trio, everybody here, they're all turning on all the lights, they're searching the house, they're determined to find this thing. Well, they find nothing. And after Bob and his wife head home, Bill looks into hiring a paranormal team to investigate this. Lucky for him, he finds one, and they're like, yep, we'll give you a hand. The leader of the team was a man by the name of Brian Hall, and after the team ruled out all logical explanations, they were like, okay, we're gonna set up a couple of cameras. They do so in the bedroom, they put up some laser sensors, some other tools, and they're like, let's see what's going on. One of the team members stays in the room after everybody else exits, trying to coax out the spirit, doing a lot of stupid stuff, and then one of the lasers falls. So this person leaves the room to check the cameras, and while looking at the footage, they see a mist forming on the tapes. That's about it for evidence that they got that night. But as the team packs up and leaves, they're like, hey, Bill, maybe you should go somewhere else. And Bob had actually invited Bill over earlier in the night, and Bill's like, nope, this is my place, we're sticking to it. So Bill goes back to his room, with all the lights on, music playing, and this time things get violent. He hears what sounds like a huge truck smashing into the side of his house. He sprints to check it out, even goes outside to investigate, and there's nothing. So he goes back inside, and we get that crashing sound again, and it's in the same area as the original creature running. Then he hears his car alarm go off, and he's screaming at this point, just show yourself, you stupid censored. And it does. So there's another loud crashing sound up in his bedroom. He runs to it, ready to fight, and there's nothing. After what feels like an eternity of this horrible smashing sound, it just completely stops. And it's dead silence. So after quite a while, Bill goes back to bed, same circumstances as earlier, but now he's petrified, and rightfully so. Around the middle of the night, he starts hearing a noise that sounds like shuffling underneath his bed. So he gathers his courage, looks under his bed, and comes face to face with this huge dark creature. He, jumps back, recoils, and the creature emerges. It's over 6 feet tall, hooded, with noticeably big teeth, and it jerks towards Bill. So close that the two of them are almost nose to nose. But then the creature grunts and disappears. So after that night, what happened? Well, the creature kept coming back and challenging Bill. He'd wake up more often than not with scratches all over his chest. He was actually hospitalized a couple of times, prompting the hospital to do welfare checks on him because he was showing up with almost heart attack-like conditions pretty regularly because of the stress of the situation. Yeah, even his family was super concerned. So Bill did extensive research into demons and exorcisms, thinking back to that weird house and realized that's where he picked up the creature. I don't have any info for what happened after that, sadly, but that's hoping he's okay. Other than that, folks, I've been Alexa, your resident Ookie Spooky Girly. See y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.